The Oracle News, a prophecy broadcast for the 2000s, 2005, the storm that knew its name. The bulletin arrived 3 weeks before the water rose. It appeared on a community access channel in Biloxi, Mississippi, at 4:17 in the morning on August 6, 2005, a time when the only people watching were insomniacs, night shift workers returning home to the blue glow of televisions they had left on for company, and the occasional drunk who had fallen asleep on the couch with the remote out of reach. Darlene Mouton was none of these things. She was a 63-year-old retired schoolteacher who had woken to use the bathroom and found herself unable to return to sleep. The particular curse of aging that transforms rest into negotiation, that makes every night a series of small surrenders to a body that no longer cooperates with the mind's desire for peace. She had gone to the kitchen to make chamomile tea, and because the house felt too quiet, too empty since her husband had passed 4 years earlier, she turned on the small television that sat on the counter, the one she used for morning news while she made breakfast, the one that connected her to the outside world during the long hours when the walls of her own home felt like they were slowly closing in. The channel was supposed to be showing infomercials. Instead, it showed a newsroom, clean, calm, empty of anything except a desk, an anchor, and a graphic in the corner that said Oracle News Special Bulletin. Darlene set down her teacup. The anchor looked directly into the camera, or through it, as if the camera were merely a window, and the anchor were looking into her kitchen, into her eyes, into the part of her that had been awake at 4:17 in the morning for reasons she couldn't name. "Good morning," the anchor said, in a voice that was neither warm nor cold, neither friendly nor hostile, but simply present in a way that made Darlene's skin tighten. "This is Oracle News." A ticker began to crawl along the bottom of the screen. Headline: "A storm will know its name." The anchor continued. "In 23 days," he said, "the Gulf of Mexico will remember that it is not a resource. It is not a view. It is not a backdrop for vacation photographs or a source of shrimp for restaurants that will no longer exist." Darlene's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her tea. "The Gulf will remind you," the anchor said, "that water does not negotiate. It does not file appeals. It does not respect the borders you have drawn on maps that it has never agreed to recognize." The ticker changed. Detail: the levees were always promises. Darlene felt something cold settle in her chest, not fear exactly, but recognition, the sense that she was hearing something true in a way that truth was not supposed to be heard before it happened. "A city will drown," the anchor said, "not because the storm was unprecedented. Storms have always come, but because the preparations were performance, because the warnings were bureaucracy, because the people who made decisions believed they could schedule survival like a meeting that could be postponed." The ticker crawled. Detail: the convention center will become a testimony. And afterward, the anchor said, there will be investigations, there will be resignations, there will be promises that this will never happen again. These promises are also performance. They are the ritual humanity performs to convince itself that lessons have been learned. The anchor paused. For the first time, his expression shifted. Not to emotion, but to something that looked almost like patience. The patience of someone explaining something to a child who will not understand until it is too late. "The lesson is simple," he said. "Infrastructure is a choice. Maintenance is a choice. The decision to protect some neighborhoods and not others is a choice. The storm does not make these choices. You do." The ticker changed one final time. Final note: Katrina is not a prediction. Katrina is a filing. The screen flickered. For one frame, less than a second, Darlene saw something behind the anchor. Water, rising water, and in the water, faces. Faces that looked like they were waiting to be identified. Then the broadcast ended, and the infomercial resumed, and Darlene Mouton sat in her kitchen with cold tea and a feeling in her stomach that would not go away for 3 weeks. Until the storm came, until it knew its name, until the water rose exactly as high as the broadcast had implied it would rise. Darlene survived. She had driven inland on August 27th, 2 days before landfall, because she could not shake the feeling that the broadcast had been speaking directly to her, that the anchor had been looking into her kitchen, that the warning had been personal in a way that official warnings never were. She never told anyone why she left early. She never told anyone about Oracle news. But for the rest of her life, whenever a storm approached the Gulf, she would turn on the television at 4:17 in the morning and wait. The broadcast never returned. It didn't need to. The filing had been completed. 2008, money will disappear without moving. The Oracle News broadcast of 2008 did not appear on television. It appeared on a Bloomberg terminal. Marcus Webb, not the same Marcus Webb who would later investigate the 63-word articles, but a different man with the same name, a 34-year-old quantitative analyst at a mid-sized investment firm in Manhattan, was working late on September 12, 2008, trying to make sense of numbers that had stopped making sense 3 days earlier. Lehman Brothers was dying. Everyone on the street knew it. Everyone was pretending they didn't know it, because admitting what they knew would accelerate the very collapse they were hoping to avoid, the financial equivalent of not looking down when you realize you're standing on a bridge made of paper. Marcus was running models. The models were producing results that should have been impossible, correlations that shouldn't exist, risk calculations that exceeded the boundaries of the software. Numbers that suggested the entire framework he had been trained to trust was not just wrong, but had never been right. That the mathematical certainty of modern finance was a story they told each other to justify decisions that were, at their core, guesses dressed in equations. At 11:47 p.m., his Bloomberg terminal flickered. The trading data disappeared. The news feed disappeared. The familiar interface, the one Marcus had stared at for 12 years, the one he knew better than his own apartment, was replaced by something else. A clean screen. A simple graphic. Oracle News, Financial Bulletin. Marcus leaned closer to the monitor. Text began to appear, scrolling upward like a news ticker that had been rotated 90 degrees. Headline, Money will disappear without moving. Marcus reached for his phone to call IT. The phone was dead. Not disconnected. Dead in the way that phones are not supposed to be dead. Dead in a way that suggested the problem was not technical, but categorical. The text continued scrolling. The collapse you are witnessing is not a malfunction, the bulletin read. It is a correction. The system is not broken. The system is revealing what it always was, a consensus that required continuous belief to maintain its shape. Marcus's mouth went dry. Money is not a thing, the bulletin continued. It is an agreement. When the agreement fractures, the money does not go anywhere. It simply stops being agreed upon. The disappearance is not movement. It is evaporation. The ticker at the bottom of the screen began to crawl. Detail. Lehman is not the cause. Lehman is the permission. Marcus felt his hands go cold. He had spent his career believing that markets were rational, that prices reflected information, that the numbers he analyzed corresponded to something real, some underlying truth that could be measured and predicted and optimized. The bulletin was telling him something different. It was telling him that the numbers had never been real, that they had been a collective fiction, that the models he trusted were not descriptions of reality but incantations, rituals performed by people who needed to believe that what they were doing was science rather than religion. And afterward, the bulletin read, the system will be rebuilt, not reformed. Rebuilt. The same architecture, the same assumptions, the same agreements that failed will be reinstated with minor adjustments and new vocabulary. The ticker changed. Detail. Too big to fail is not a policy. It is a confession. The lesson that should be learned will not be learned, the bulletin continued. The lesson is that systems built on belief require constant maintenance of that belief. When the maintenance fails, the system does not crash. It reveals that it was never solid. It was always consensus wearing the costume of physics. Marcus stared at the screen. He wanted to look away. He couldn't. This is not a prediction, the bulletin concluded. This is an inventory. The losses have already been calculated. The bankruptcies have already been approved. The bailouts have already been budgeted. You are not watching a crisis unfold. You are watching a schedule execute. The screen flickered. For one frame, Marcus saw something behind the text. Numbers. Columns and rows of numbers that stretched beyond the edges of the screen, beyond the capacity of any monitor to display, numbers that seemed to recede into infinity, like the cataloging of everything that had ever been traded and would ever be lost. Then his Bloomberg terminal returned to normal. The trading data reappeared. The news feed resumed. And Marcus Webb sat at his desk at 11:49 p.m. on September 12, 2008, understanding for the first time that the numbers he had dedicated his life to analyzing were not measurements. They were prayers. And the God they prayed to did not answer. 2010, The Earth Will Remind You. The broadcast appeared in Port-au-Prince on January 11, 2010. It appeared on a radio frequency that did not exist. Jean-Baptiste Desrosiers was a taxi driver who had installed a shortwave radio in his vehicle years earlier, a habit from his father, who had believed that shortwave was the only reliable communication during disasters, the only technology that could not be silenced by governments or corporations or whatever forces controlled the official channels. Jean-Baptiste had never found anything interesting on shortwave. Static, mostly. Occasional broadcasts from distant countries in languages he didn't understand. The loneliness of the airwaves at night, when it seemed like the whole world was asleep and only the radio remained awake, listening to a silence that stretched across oceans. But on the night of January 11th, while he was driving home after a 16-hour shift, the radio crackled to life. A voice, calm, clear, speaking in Creole that was too perfect, too precisely grammatical, like it had been learned from a textbook rather than heard in the streets. Bonsoir, the voice said. This is Oracle News. Your world will continue to call these events natural. That is a comfort. Comfort is not truth. Jean-Baptiste pulled his taxi to the side of the road. He stared at the radio as if it had become something other than a radio. Tomorrow, the voice continued, the earth will remind you that you do not own it. You have never owned it. You have been guests, and guests who forget they are guests eventually learn what it means to overstay their welcome. Jean-Baptiste's hands gripped the steering wheel. A fault line that has been patient for 242 years will stop being patient, the voice said. Not because it was provoked, not because it was angry, because geological time does not account for human time, because the planet operates on schedules that your calendars cannot contain. The static crackled. Through it, Jean-Baptiste heard something that sounded like a ticker, a rhythm of clicks and pauses that formed a pattern he could almost decode. 300,000 will transition, the voice said. Your news will call them victims. Your politicians will call them statistics. Your aid organizations will call them beneficiaries. These are all words that help the living process the dead. They do not describe the dead. They describe the living's need to continue living. Jean-Baptiste felt tears on his face that he didn't remember crying. And afterward, the voice said, the world will send money. The world will send supplies. The world will send cameras to document its own generosity. This is the ritual. This is how guilt is processed into content. This is how distance is maintained between those who help and those who suffer. The voice paused. The help will be needed, the voice continued. The help will save lives, but the help will also reinforce the hierarchy that made the disaster worse than it needed to be. Poverty is not a natural condition. It is a construction. The earthquake does not distinguish between rich and poor. The buildings do. The static intensified. Jean-Baptiste strained to hear. This is not a prediction, the voice said. This is a filing. The coordinates have been submitted. The magnitude has been approved. The timeline is final. The radio went silent. Normal static returned. Jean-Baptiste sat in his taxi on the side of a dark road in Port-au-Prince, trying to process what he had just heard, trying to decide whether he was awake or dreaming, whether the broadcast had been real or a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and the particular loneliness of driving through a city at midnight. He drove home. He told his wife what he had heard. She told him to sleep. He slept. The next day at 4:53 p.m., the earth remembered. Jean-Baptiste survived because he had been in his taxi, which had been parked in an open area away from buildings. His wife did not survive. His home did not survive. His city did not survive in the form it had existed before. And for the rest of his life, Jean-Baptiste Desrosiers would tell anyone who would listen about the broadcast he had heard the night before, about the voice that had known, about the filing that had been submitted, about the timeline that had been final. Most people thought he was processing trauma through fantasy. Most people thought the grief had broken something in him. Most people did not believe in Oracle news, but Jean-Baptiste knew what he had heard. And he knew that the voice had not been predicting. It had been announcing. The way a news anchor announces events that have already happened. Except these events hadn't happened yet. They had simply been approved. 2011, the wave that had been waiting. The bulletin appeared in Japan on March 10, 2011. It appeared on the emergency broadcast system. This should have been impossible. The emergency broadcast system in Japan was one of the most sophisticated in the world, a network of fail-safes and redundancies designed to withstand earthquakes, power outages, and any other disaster that the engineers who built it could imagine. The system was not supposed to be vulnerable to unauthorized access. The system was not supposed to broadcast anything that had not been approved by multiple levels of government oversight. The system was not supposed to show a clean newsroom with an anchor who never blinked. But at 2:46 a.m. on March 10, 2011, the system showed exactly that. Millions of people saw it. Most of them thought it was a test. Most of them changed the channel and went back to sleep. But some of them watched, and some of them remembered what they saw, even after the official investigation concluded that there had been no unauthorized broadcast. Even after the government insisted that the emergency system had functioned normally, even after the engineers checked every line of code and found no evidence that anything unusual had occurred. The anchor spoke in Japanese, perfect Japanese, the Japanese of official broadcasts, of formal announcements, of communications that are designed to be understood by everyone, regardless of regional dialect or educational background. "Good evening," the anchor said. "This is Oracle News. Your world will continue to call these events unprecedented. That is a comfort. Comfort is not truth." A graphic appeared in the corner of the screen. Oracle News, Pacific Bulletin. The ticker began to crawl. Headline: "The wave has been waiting." "Tomorrow," the anchor said, "the Pacific Plate will complete a process that began 140 years ago. The pressure that has been accumulating will be released. This is not a catastrophe. This is maintenance. The planet does not operate on human schedules. It operates on its own." The ticker changed. Detail: "The seawall is a suggestion. The wave that follows," the anchor continued, "will not be deterred by walls. It will not be stopped by preparations. It will measure exactly how much of your infrastructure was built on the assumption that some disasters are too large to prepare for." The anchor's expression remained neutral. "And the plant," the anchor said, "will demonstrate what happens when fail-safes are designed by people who believe that certain failures are impossible. The plant will show you that impossible is a word used by people who have not imagined carefully enough." The ticker crawled. Detail: "Fukushima is not a malfunction. Fukushima is a test of assumptions. The test will fail," the anchor said. Not because the engineers were incompetent, because the engineers were operating within a framework that did not allow them to imagine what would actually happen. They were limited by the boundaries of acceptable scenarios. The reality will exceed those boundaries. The screen flickered. For one frame, viewers saw something behind the anchor. Water. A wall of water so vast that it seemed to fill the entire background, stretching from one edge of the screen to the other, rising toward a height that should have been impossible. And in front of the water, a coastline. Buildings. People. All of them frozen in the moment before impact. Then the broadcast ended. The emergency system returned to its normal standby state. The government denied that any unauthorized broadcast had occurred. The engineers found no evidence of tampering. And the next day, at 2:46 p.m., exactly 12 hours after the broadcast had appeared, the Pacific Plate released 140 years of accumulated pressure. The magnitude was 9.1. The wave was over 40 meters high in some locations. And the plant, the one the anchor had mentioned, the one that was supposed to be protected by fail-safes that were supposed to prevent exactly what happened, the plant demonstrated exactly what happens when assumptions meet reality. The assumptions lost, reality continued. And somewhere in the archives of the emergency broadcast system, There was no record that Oracle News had ever appeared. The filing had been completed. The schedule had been executed. The wave had finished waiting. 2012, the end that was a misunderstanding. Oracle News appeared on the internet for the first time on December 20th, 2012. It appeared on every social media platform simultaneously, not as a post from a specific account. No one could trace its origin. No algorithm could identify how it had spread. No moderator could find the source to delete it, but as a piece of content that seemed to have always existed, that people discovered rather than received, that appeared in feeds and timelines with no indication of when it had been uploaded or by whom. The content was a video, 2 minutes and 47 seconds, the same newsroom, the same anchor, the same calm, measured delivery. "Good evening," the anchor said. "This is Oracle News. Your world has been anticipating an ending. We are here to clarify." A graphic appeared. Oracle News, calendar correction. The ticker crawled. Headline, "The end was a misunderstanding." The Mayan calendar, the anchor said, did not predict the end of the world. The Mayan calendar predicted the end of a cycle. Your species has a tendency to confuse cycles with conclusions. This is understandable. Conclusions are easier to dramatize. The ticker changed. Detail. Apocalypse is a genre, not a schedule. The world will not end tomorrow, the anchor continued, but something will end. The era of predictable endings will end. The time when the future felt linear, when progress seemed inevitable, when tomorrow was expected to be better than today, that assumption will begin to fracture. The anchor paused. "This is not a prophecy of doom," he said. "This is an observation about psychology. The ending you feared was dramatic. The ending you will experience will be gradual. It will not arrive as a single event. It will arrive as a slow erosion of certainty." The ticker crawled. Detail. The apocalypse you expected would have been easier. "In the years that follow," the anchor said, "you will begin to notice that the future feels different. Less solid, less inevitable. The confidence that sustained the 20th century, the belief that tomorrow would be shaped by progress and reason, will become harder to maintain." The anchor looked directly into the camera. "This is not the end of the world," he said. "This is the end of expecting the world to make sense." The ticker changed one final time. Final note, the Mayans were not wrong. You were translating incorrectly. The video ended. Within hours, it had been viewed millions of times. Within days, it had been analyzed by experts who could not explain how it had appeared, debunked by skeptics who insisted it was an elaborate hoax, and forgotten by a public that was too busy celebrating the non-arrival of apocalypse to notice what the broadcast had actually said. December 21st, 2012 came and went. The world did not end, but something did shift. Something in the collective sense of direction. Something in the assumption that tomorrow would follow logically from today. The people who had watched the Oracle News broadcast and actually listened to it, not the headline, not the spectacle, but the actual content, those people understood what had changed. The future was no longer being released in a predictable sequence. The future was becoming unpredictable in ways that felt deliberately chaotic. The future was fragmenting, and Oracle News had announced it exactly one day before the fragmentation began. 2016, Truth Will Fracture. The broadcast appeared during a presidential debate. For exactly 7 seconds, every television showing the debate, every network, every cable channel, every streaming service that was carrying the live feed showed something other than the candidates. It showed a newsroom. It showed an anchor. It showed a ticker that crawled across the bottom of the screen with words that would later be denied by every network, every cable company, every streaming service, every official body that was responsible for what appeared on American television screens. Headline, Truth Will Fracture. 7 seconds. That was all. But in those 7 seconds, the anchor spoke. "Good evening," he said. "This is Oracle News. Your world is about to learn that truth is not a single object. It is a consensus, and consensus can be manufactured." The ticker changed. Detail, the algorithm will replace the editor. "In the years that follow this election," the anchor said, "you will notice that facts no longer function as anchors. They will function as options. You will be able to choose your truth the way you choose your entertainment, and you will choose the truth that feels correct rather than the truth that is correct." The ticker crawled. Confirmation bias will become an industry. This is not a conspiracy, the anchor said. This is an optimization. The systems that deliver information have learned that engagement matters more than accuracy. They will continue to learn. They will become better at showing you what you want to see, and you will forget that what you see is a reflection of your preferences rather than a window into reality. 7 seconds ended. The debate resumed. The candidates continued speaking, but something had changed in the room. Not the physical room, not the room where the debate was being held, but the collective room of American attention. The shared space where people watched things together and assumed they were watching the same thing. That assumption was dying. That assumption had been diagnosed with a terminal condition. Oracle News had announced the diagnosis during a presidential debate in a 7-second interruption that would later be attributed to a technical glitch, to a signal interference, to anything except what it actually was. A filing, an announcement, a notice that the era of shared truth was ending and the era of fractured truth was beginning. The election happened. The results shocked half the country. The other half was not surprised. They had been watching a different reality, consuming different facts, living in a different truth that had been optimized for their preferences. And in the years that followed, the fracture widened. The truths multiplied. The consensus dissolved. And Oracle News had announced it all in 7 seconds that no one would admit they had seen, in a broadcast that left no record except in the memories of people who were learning not to trust their own memories. 2020. The world will practice stillness. The broadcast appeared on January 1st, 2020. It appeared everywhere: television, radio, social media, emergency alert systems, billboards in Times Square, the screens in airports and train stations and shopping malls. Every display that was capable of showing images showed the same thing simultaneously for exactly 60 seconds. A newsroom, an anchor, a bulletin. Oracle News. Global announcement. Most people thought it was a hack. Most people thought it was a coordinated stunt, a viral marketing campaign, a demonstration of how vulnerable the world's communication infrastructure had become. Most people did not believe what the anchor said. "Good morning," the anchor said. "This is Oracle News. Your world is about to practice stillness." The ticker crawled. Headline: A pause is coming. In the weeks that follow, the anchor said, a contagion will emerge. Not the contagion you fear, not the dramatic plague of fiction, not the extinction-level event that your movies have trained you to expect. A quieter contagion, a patient contagion, one that teaches by demonstration rather than destruction. The ticker changed. Detail. The lesson will be about infrastructure. The contagion will reveal what you have built, the anchor continued. It will show you which systems are resilient and which are fragile. It will demonstrate who is essential and who is not. It will force you to question assumptions about work, about community, about the necessity of proximity. The anchor's expression remained neutral, and it will ask you to be still, he said. Not as punishment, as practice. Your species has been accelerating for centuries. The acceleration cannot continue indefinitely. The world will teach you this by removing the option of acceleration for a time. The ticker crawled. Detail. The essential will be revealed. The revelation will not be celebrated. The people who keep your world functioning, the anchor said, will be visible for the first time. The people who deliver your packages, who stock your shelves, who clean your spaces, who care for your sick. You will call them heroes. You will clap for them. And when the pause ends, you will forget them again. The ticker changed. Detail. Memory is optional. Change is not. This is not a prediction, the anchor said. This is a schedule. The filing has been completed. The timeline is final. The world will practice stillness whether it wants to or not. The question is not whether the pause will happen. The question is what you will learn from it. The screen flickered. For one frame, 60 seconds compressed into a single image, viewers saw something behind the anchor. A map of the world. And on the map, spreading from a single point in East Asia, a color, red, expanding outward like a stain, covering cities, countries, continents, until the entire map was red. Then the broadcast ended. The screens returned to normal. The hack was attributed to unknown actors. The investigation was launched. The footage was analyzed. No source was found. And 3 weeks later, the first cases were reported in a city called Wuhan. The world did not practice stillness gracefully. The world argued and denied and resisted and politicized, but the world practiced stillness nonetheless. Because Oracle News had not been predicting, it had been announcing. The filing had been completed, the timeline was final, and the pause had been scheduled long before anyone knew it was coming. 2022. Borders will remember they are drawn new. The broadcast appeared on February 23, 2022. It appeared on Ukrainian television. It appeared on Russian television. It appeared on both sides of a border that was about to become something other than a line on a map. The same anchor, the same newsroom, the same calm, measured tone that had characterized every Oracle News broadcast since 2001. "Good evening," the anchor said. "This is Oracle News. Your world is about to remember that borders are not natural features. They are agreements, and agreements can be broken." The ticker crawled. Headline: "A war will remind you what war is." In the hours that follow, the anchor said, a decision that has already been made will be executed. The decision was not made today. The decision was made months ago, years ago, decades ago, accumulated in grievances and ambitions and the specific psychology of men who believe that history has assigned them a destiny. The ticker changed. Detail: the footage will make it feel close. The distance will make it feel far. Your world has grown accustomed to wars that happen elsewhere, the anchor continued. Wars that can be watched on screens, wars that generate content, wars that feel like events rather than experiences. This war will be different and the same. Different because it will threaten the assumptions of the post-Cold War order. Same because you will still watch it on screens. The anchor's expression remained neutral. "And you will be asked to care," he said. "You will be asked to donate, to advocate, to change your profile pictures, to demonstrate solidarity. These are the rituals of distant war. They are not meaningless, but they are not sufficient. They are the minimum your conscience requires to continue functioning." The ticker crawled. Detail: the war will not end when the cameras move on. "This is not a prediction," the anchor said. "This is an announcement. The orders have been signed. The troops have been positioned. The narrative has been prepared. You are not watching the beginning of a war. You are watching the public execution of a decision that was made in private." The screen flickered. For one frame, viewers on both sides of the border saw something behind the anchor. A map, a border, and on both sides of the border, armies, not as symbols, not as graphics, but as masses of individual figures, each one representing a person who would be asked to kill or be killed based on a decision they had not made. Then the broadcast ended. The next morning, the war began. And Oracle News had been right again. Not predicting, announcing, filing reports about events that had already been approved, already been scheduled, already been budgeted, waiting only for the public timeline to catch up with the private one. 2024. The future will stop answering. The last Oracle News broadcast appeared on March 14, 2024. It appeared everywhere and nowhere. It appeared on screens that were turned off. It appeared in newspapers that had not been printed. It appeared in the dreams of people who would wake up remembering every word without being able to explain how they had heard them. The anchor sat at his desk. The newsroom was the same as it had always been, clean, calm, empty of anything except the infrastructure of announcement. But something was different. The anchor looked tired. For the first time in 23 years of broadcasts, the anchor showed an expression that was almost human. Not quite exhaustion, not quite resignation, but something in the neighborhood of both. "Good evening," the anchor said. "This is Oracle News. This will be our final broadcast." The ticker began to crawl. Headline: "The future will stop answering." "For 23 years," the anchor said, "we have been releasing information about events that had been scheduled but not yet executed. We have been announcing what your world would experience before your world experienced it. We have been filing reports from a future that was, for us, already complete." The ticker changed. Detail: the archive is now empty. "We have shown you what was coming because showing was our function," the anchor continued. "We did not predict. We did not prophesy. We simply published. We released information that had been prepared in advance, schedules that had been approved, timelines that had been finalized. events that were waiting to happen. The anchor paused. But now, he said, the archive has been exhausted. The ticker crawled. Detail. There is nothing left to announce. The events we were designed to announce have all been announced, the anchor said. The schedules we were designed to release have all been released. The future that was prepared, the future that was predictable because it had been planned, that future has been fully distributed. The anchor's expression shifted again, something that looked almost like concern. What comes next, he said, has not been filed. What comes next has not been approved. What comes next is not in our archive because what comes next has not been determined. The ticker changed. Final note, the silence is not peace. The silence is uncertainty. For 23 years, the anchor said, you could have known what was coming if you had listened. The broadcasts were available. The announcements were public. The information was released to anyone who was paying attention. He looked directly into the camera. But now we have nothing left to tell you, he said. Not because the danger has passed, because the danger has become unpredictable. The future that is approaching has not been scheduled. It has not been filed. It has not been approved by whatever system was responsible for approving the events we announced. The ticker crawled one final time. Conclusion. This is not the end of prophecy. This is the end of certainty. The future was being released, the anchor said. Now it is being improvised. What comes next will not be announced in advance. What comes next will simply happen, without warning, without preparation, without the comfort of knowing that someone, somewhere, had already documented it before it arrived. The anchor stood. For the first time in 23 years of broadcasts, the anchor left his desk. He walked toward the camera. He walked until his face filled the screen. This is Oracle News, he said, signing off. Not because our work is complete, because our work is no longer possible. The future has stopped being predictable. The future has stopped being filed. The future has stopped answering our requests for information. He paused, and if the future has stopped answering us, he said, it has stopped answering everyone. The screen went dark. The broadcast ended, and across the world, people who had witnessed Oracle News broadcasts, some of them for the first time, some of them remembering broadcasts they had seen decades earlier, understood what the silence meant. It didn't mean the danger had passed. It meant the system had changed. The future was no longer being released according to a schedule. The future was improvising, and improvisation meant that anything could happen, anything at all, without warning, without announcement, without the strange comfort of knowing that someone, somewhere, had already documented what was coming. The Oracle had gone silent, not because it had nothing left to say, because there was nothing left to know. Epilogue. The archive closes. In the months following the final Oracle News broadcast, researchers and archivists around the world attempted to compile a complete record of every bulletin that had ever appeared. They failed. The broadcasts had left no traces, no recordings, no documentation, no evidence that they had ever occurred except for the memories of people who had witnessed them, memories that were dismissed as hoaxes, hallucinations, urban legends, the collective delusion of a species that wanted to believe that someone, somewhere, was watching over them. But the memories persisted. The witnesses remembered, and slowly, through word of mouth and internet forums and the particular archaeology of conspiracy communities, a picture emerged. Oracle News had been operating for at least 23 years, possibly longer. It had announced major events before they occurred, not through supernatural means, but through access to information that should not have been available. It had filed reports about the future as if the future were already complete. And then, in 2024, it had stopped. The theories about why it stopped varied. Some believed that Oracle News had been a government program, a psychological operation designed to test public response to impossible information. Some believed it had been an artificial intelligence, a system that had somehow gained access to predictive models sophisticated enough to announce events before they happened. Some believed it had been something else entirely, something outside of human understanding, something that existed in the infrastructure of information itself, something that had been publishing the future into the present for reasons that humans were not equipped to comprehend. But all the theories agreed on one thing. The silence was not reassuring. The silence meant that whatever had been filing reports about the future had run out of reports to file. The silence meant that the future was no longer being documented in advance. The silence meant that what came next would arrive without announcement, without preparation, without the strange mercy of knowing that it was coming. The world continued. Events continued to occur, but they occurred differently now. They occurred without the feeling that someone, somewhere, already knew. They occurred in the genuine unknown. And for the first time in at least 23 years, possibly longer, humanity faced a future that had not been released in advance. A future that was being written as it happened. A future that no one had filed. A future that no one had approved. A future that simply arrived, moment by moment, without oracle news to announce what was coming before it came. The last known person to witness an Oracle News broadcast was a woman named Sarah Chen, a retired nurse in Portland who had seen the 2020 bulletin about the coming pandemic. She was interviewed by an independent journalist in 2025, a year after the final broadcast. "I used to be afraid when I saw the broadcasts," she said. "Afraid because they told me terrible things were coming, but now that they've stopped, I'm more afraid than I've ever been." "Why?" the journalist asked. Sarah Chen was quiet for a long moment, because when Oracle News was broadcasting, she said, "At least I knew someone was watching. Someone was keeping track. Someone had access to information about what was going to happen, even if that information was terrible." She looked out the window. "Now there's just silence," she said. "And silence doesn't mean safety. Silence means no one is watching anymore. Silence means the future is being made up as it goes along." She turned back to the journalist. "That's the real horror," she said. "Not the announcements. The announcements were warnings. The silence isn't a warning. The silence is just absence, the absence of anyone who knows what's coming next." The journalist asked if she had any advice for people who were trying to make sense of what had happened. Sarah Chen thought about it. "Pay attention," she said finally. "That's all Oracle News ever really asked of us. Pay attention to what's happening. Pay attention to the patterns. Pay attention to the warnings, even when the warnings come from sources you don't understand." She paused. "And now that Oracle News is gone," she said, "we have to pay attention for ourselves, because no one is going to announce the future anymore. We're going to have to figure it out as it arrives." The interview ended. The journalist published the piece. It was read by a few thousand people and forgotten by most of them. But the message lingered. Oracle News had gone silent. The archive was closed, the future was no longer being released, and the silence that remained was not peace. It was the sound of uncertainty becoming permanent. It was the sound of a world that would have to face whatever came next without anyone to announce it in advance. It was the sound of the future refusing to answer, forever. This was the final Oracle News broadcast. The archive is now closed. What comes next has not been filed. What comes next has not been approved. What comes next will simply arrive, without warning, without announcement, without mercy. Pay attention. The future has stopped answering. You are on your own. The Witnesses, an Oral History. In the years following the final Oracle News broadcast, a small community of researchers began collecting testimonies from people who claimed to have witnessed the bulletins firsthand, people who had seen the anchor, heard the announcements, watched the tickers crawl across screens that should not have been displaying anything except normal programming. The project was unofficial. No university would fund it. No publisher would commit to it. No institution wanted to be associated with research into broadcasts that officially did not exist, that had left no records, that were categorized by mainstream media as mass hysteria or coordinated hoax, or the inevitable byproduct of a society that had lost its ability to distinguish between information and entertainment. But the researchers persisted. They conducted interviews. They compiled testimonies. They built an archive of memories that contradicted the official narrative, an archive that existed only in encrypted files and handwritten notebooks and the minds of people who knew what they had seen, even when the world told them they had seen nothing. What follows are excerpts from that archive. Testimonies from the witnesses, voices from the people who saw Oracle News, and understood what it meant. A record of remembering in a world that preferred to forget. Testimony of Marcus Reyes, Los Angeles, California. Witness 2001 broadcast. I was 17 years old. I was homesick from school, some kind of flu, I don't remember exactly, and I was watching television in my parents' bedroom because they had the bigger screen, and I was bored out of my mind. It was daytime, maybe 2 in the afternoon. The television was showing some talk show, one of those daytime programs where people yell at each other about paternity tests or cheating spouses. I wasn't really watching, I was half asleep. And then the screen changed. Not gradually, not with any kind of transition, just changed. 1 second it was the talk show, the next second it was this newsroom, clean, empty, an anchor sitting at a desk with perfect posture, looking directly into the camera like he could see me lying in my parents' bed with a fever. I remember thinking, this is weird, this doesn't look like a real news show. But I didn't change the channel. I don't know why. Something about the way the anchor was looking at me made me feel like I was supposed to watch, like this was happening specifically for me. The ticker said something about the sky being rewritten. I remember that phrase exactly. The sky will be rewritten. And the anchor talked about towers falling, about a Tuesday that wouldn't feel special until it did. I was 17. I didn't really understand what he was talking about, but I remember the feeling. The feeling that I was being told something important by someone who already knew it was true. Not guessing, not predicting, knowing. Like he was reading from a script that had already been approved. The broadcast lasted maybe 2 minutes. Then the talk show came back. The audience was laughing about something. The host was smiling. Everything was normal again. I tried to tell my mom when she got home from work. She said I had been dreaming. Fever dreams. She said I should drink more fluids and stop watching television. 6 months later, I watched the towers fall on the same television in the same bedroom. And I knew that the broadcast had been real. I knew that someone had announced it before it happened. I knew that the sky had been rewritten exactly the way the anchor said it would be. I've spent 23 years trying to understand what I saw. I've read every theory, every explanation, every debunking. None of them satisfy me. Because I was there, I saw it, I heard the anchor's voice, I felt the weight of knowing something before it happened. And now that Oracle News has stopped broadcasting, I feel lost. Not because I missed the warnings, because I missed the sense that someone was paying attention, that someone was keeping track, that the future wasn't just happening randomly, chaotically, without any kind of documentation. Now there's just silence, and silence is worse than warnings. Silence means no one knows what's coming next, not even Oracle News. Testimony of Elena Vasquez, Mexico City, Mexico, witnessed 2008 broadcast. I was working as a cleaning woman in a financial office building in Mexico City. The night shift, the worst shift, from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, vacuuming floors and emptying trash cans and cleaning bathrooms that the executives would dirty again the next day without ever thinking about who made them clean. I didn't mind the work. The work was honest. What I minded was the invisibility. The way the people in that building looked through me like I wasn't there, like I was part of the furniture, like my existence was a function rather than a life. On September 14th, 2008, I remember the date because it was my daughter's birthday. I was cleaning the trading floor. The big room with all the screens and the desks and the chairs where the young men in expensive suits sat during the day, staring at numbers, making money appear and disappear with clicks and keystrokes. The screens were supposed to be off. They were always off at night. But when I walked onto the trading floor at 2:30 in the morning, every screen was on. All of them showing the same thing. A newsroom, an anchor, a ticker that said something about money disappearing without moving. I should have been scared. I should have called security. I should have done something other than what I did, which was stand there in the middle of that empty trading floor, surrounded by glowing screens, watching a broadcast that no one had authorized. The anchor spoke in English, but I understood him. Not because I speak English well. I don't. But because the words seemed to arrive in my mind already translated, already processed, already meaning what they meant, without needing to pass through the usual channels of comprehension. He talked about money being an agreement, about the agreement fracturing, about the disappearance being evaporation rather than movement. I didn't understand the economics, but I understood the feeling. The feeling that the men who sat at these desks, who looked through me like I was invisible, who believed they understood how the world worked, those men were about to learn that they understood nothing. The broadcast ended. The screens went dark. I finished my cleaning and went home. A few days later, the financial crisis began. The screens on that trading floor showed nothing but red. The young men in expensive suits walked around with expressions I had never seen on them before: fear, confusion, the particular panic of people who had believed they were in control and were learning that control was an illusion. I wanted to tell them, I knew before you did. The cleaning woman who empties your trash cans, she saw it coming before any of your models did. But I didn't tell them. What would have been the point? They wouldn't have believed me. And besides, knowing in advance hadn't changed anything. The collapse happened anyway. The money disappeared anyway. The agreement fractured anyway. That's what I learned from Oracle News. Knowing doesn't save you. Knowing just means you suffer twice. Once when you find out, and once when it happens. But I would still rather know. I would still rather have the warning. Now that the warnings have stopped, I feel like I'm walking through the world blind. Like anything could happen at any moment, and there's no one to announce it beforehand. That's the real loss. Not the broadcasts themselves. The sense that someone was watching. The sense that the future wasn't completely dark. Now it's dark. Completely dark. And I'm just a cleaning woman waiting for the next disaster to announce itself by arriving. Testimony of Thomas Anderson, Stockholm, Sweden. Witnessed, 2016 broadcast. I was watching the American presidential debate with my wife. We weren't American, obviously. But the whole world was watching that election. The whole world understood that something strange was happening, that the normal rules of politics were being suspended, that the future was taking a shape no one had expected. We had a nice apartment in Stockholm. Good jobs. 2 children asleep in their bedrooms. A life that felt stable in the way that Scandinavian lives are supposed to feel stable. Supported by systems, protected by institutions, insulated from the chaos that seemed to be consuming other parts of the world. The debate was on our television. The candidates were speaking. The moderators were struggling to maintain order. Everything was normal for what had become a very abnormal normal. And then the screen flickered. 7 seconds. That's how long it lasted. 7 seconds of a different broadcast. A newsroom. An anchor. A ticker that said, "Truth will fracture." My wife looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us said anything. The debate resumed. The candidates continued speaking. The moderators continued struggling. Everything returned to the chaos that had become routine. But I couldn't stop thinking about those 7 seconds. Truth will fracture. The phrase stayed with me. It stayed with me through the election, through the years that followed, through the slow realization that the anchor had been exactly right. Truth did fracture. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily, consistently, the way ice fractures under pressure. Small cracks first, then larger ones, then finally the whole surface breaking apart into pieces that no longer fit together. My children grew up in a world where truth was fractured, where facts were optional, where you could choose your reality like you chose your streaming service. I tried to explain to them what it had been like before, when there was something called consensus, when people could disagree about values but agree about facts, when the shared foundation of truth made debate possible rather than pointless. They didn't understand. How could they? They had never lived in a world where truth was whole. They had only lived in the fracture. And now Oracle News has stopped broadcasting. I find this terrifying in a way I can't fully explain, because as long as Oracle News was announcing things, there was a sense that someone had access to a truth that was still whole. Someone could still see the pattern. Someone still knew what was coming. Now there's no one. The truth is fractured, and there's no one to announce what the fractured pieces will do next. We're all just guessing now. Everyone is guessing. And guessing is not the same as knowing. Guessing is just hoping dressed up in confidence. I'm 54 years old. I've lived through enough history to know that terrible things happen, and humanity survives them. We adapt, we adjust, we find ways to continue. But I've never felt as uncertain as I feel now. Not because of any specific threat, because of the absence of knowing, the silence where Oracle News used to be, the darkness where the warnings used to shine. I miss the broadcasts, not because they were comforting. They weren't, because at least when they were broadcasting, someone was watching. Now no one is watching, and the future is dark, completely dark. Testimony of Amaro Konkwo, Lagos, Nigeria. Witnessed 2020 broadcast. The broadcast appeared on my phone. I was in a taxi, stuck in Lagos traffic, the famous Lagos traffic, the traffic that moves so slowly you could get out and walk faster, the traffic that gives you nothing to do except stare at your phone and wait for the world to move. It was January 1st, 2020, New Year's Day. Everyone was talking about the new decade. Everyone was making predictions about what the 2020s would bring. Everyone was optimistic in the way that people are optimistic at the beginning of things, before the things actually begin. My phone screen changed. I hadn't opened any app. I hadn't clicked any link. The screen just changed, replaced by a video that started playing without my permission, without my consent, without any indication of where it was coming from or how it had appeared. A newsroom, an anchor, a ticker that said the world will practice stillness. I watched the whole thing. The anchor talked about a contagion, a pause, a period of stillness that would reveal who was essential and who was not. I watched it in the back of a taxi in Lagos traffic on New Year's Day, surrounded by people who were celebrating, who were hopeful, who had no idea what was about to happen. And I knew before they did. I knew that 2020 was not going to be the year anyone expected. I knew that the world was about to practice stillness, whether it wanted to or not. The video ended. My phone returned to normal. The traffic continued not moving. The world continued not knowing. I didn't tell anyone what I had seen. Who would have believed me? A random video appearing on my phone, predicting a global pandemic before anyone had heard of the virus. I would have sounded crazy. I would have sounded like one of those people who sees signs and omens in everything, who believes that the universe is sending personal messages through technology. So I stayed quiet. And a few weeks later, the first reports started coming out of China. And a few weeks after that, the world began to lock down. And a few weeks after that, everyone was practicing stillness, exactly like the broadcast said they would. I thought about that video constantly during the lockdowns. I thought about the anchor's words about essential workers being revealed and then forgotten. I thought about how right he had been, how precisely he had described what was going to happen, how clearly he had announced the future before the future arrived. And I wondered, who was he? What was Oracle News? How did they know? I never found answers. The video left no trace on my phone, no record of having been played, no evidence that it had ever existed. But I knew it was real. I knew because everything it said came true, not approximately, not vaguely, precisely, exactly. As if the future had been written in advance and the video was simply a preview, a trailer, an announcement of coming attractions that were guaranteed to arrive. Now Oracle News has stopped broadcasting. I found out about the final bulletin through the same kind of channels that I used to find out about the earlier ones. Rumors, whispers, online forums where people shared experiences that the mainstream wouldn't acknowledge. The final bulletin said the future would stop answering. The final bulletin said there was nothing left to announce. The final bulletin said we were on our own. I believe it. I believe that Oracle News told the truth in their final broadcast, just like they told the truth in all their other broadcasts. And that terrifies me. Because if Oracle News is silent, it means the future is unwritten. It means no one knows what's coming next. It means we're all stumbling forward into darkness without anyone to turn on the lights. I'm a nurse. I worked through the pandemic. I saw what happens when the world is unprepared. I don't want to see it again, but I know I will. Because the future is unwritten now, and unwritten futures are the most dangerous kind. The final archive. The researchers who compiled these testimonies understood that their work would never be accepted by mainstream institutions. The evidence was too thin. The claims were too extraordinary. The official position that Oracle News never existed, that the broadcasts were hoaxes or hallucinations or the collaborative fantasy of a connected world, was too convenient to abandon. But the researchers also understood something else. They understood that truth does not require official acceptance to be true. They understood that memories can persist even when records are erased. They understood that the witnesses were telling the truth, even if the truth could not be proven by conventional means. So they preserved what they had gathered. They encrypted the files. They distributed the archive across multiple servers in multiple countries. They created redundancies and backups and fail-safes designed to ensure that the testimonies would survive, even if the researchers themselves did not. And they wrote a final statement, a conclusion to the archive that would explain to anyone who found it in the future what they had been trying to accomplish. The statement read, "Final Statement of the Oracle News Archive Project." We do not know what Oracle News was. We do not know who created it, who operated it, or how it was able to announce events before they occurred. We do not know whether the broadcasts were the product of technology, of intelligence, of something beyond human comprehension entirely. But we know the broadcasts were real. We know because the witnesses are real. We know because their testimonies align across years and continents and circumstances in ways that cannot be explained by coincidence or coordination. We know because the events that were announced actually happened, exactly as described, exactly on schedule. Oracle News was not predicting the future. Oracle News was releasing the future, publishing it in advance, announcing it before it arrived, and now Oracle News has gone silent. The final broadcast, witnessed by more people than any previous bulletin, distributed across more platforms than any previous announcement, declared that the archive was empty. There was nothing left to announce. The future had stopped answering. We do not know what this means. We do not know whether the silence is temporary or permanent. We do not know whether Oracle News will ever broadcast again. But we know what the silence feels like. It feels like darkness. It feels like uncertainty. It feels like walking forward without knowing whether the ground ahead is solid or empty. For 23 years, Oracle News provided warnings. Terrible warnings, yes. Warnings about disasters and collapses and fractures in the fabric of shared reality. But warnings nonetheless. Information about what was coming. Time to prepare, even if preparation was impossible. Now there are no warnings. Now there is only silence. And silence, we are learning, is worse than knowledge. Silence means no one is watching. Silence means no one knows. Silence means the future is unwritten, unscheduled, unapproved, arriving moment by moment without any advance notice, without any filing, without any system to document it before it happens. We are archiving the testimonies because we believe they matter. We are preserving the memories because we believe that remembering matters. We are maintaining this record because we believe that someone, someday, will want to understand what Oracle News was and what its silence means. To whoever finds this archive, pay attention. The witnesses paid attention, and they understood things that others did not. Paying attention is not enough to prevent disasters, but it is enough to recognize them when they arrive. It is enough to see patterns that others miss. It is enough to maintain a connection to truth in a world where truth has fractured. Oracle News is silent, but attention is not. Attention is the only warning system we have left. Use it. Watch carefully. Listen carefully. The future is no longer being announced, but it is still arriving. Every moment, without warning. Without mercy. Without Oracle News to tell us what is coming. We are on our own now. We have always been on our own. We just didn't know it. Now we do. The archive was completed on December 31st, 2025. The researchers encrypted the final files, distributed the final backups, and closed the project. They did not know if anyone would ever find what they had preserved. They did not know if the testimonies would survive the years and decades and centuries that might pass before someone looked for them. They only knew that they had done what they could. They had listened. They had documented. They had remembered. And in a world where Oracle News was silent, where the future was unwritten, where no one knew what was coming next, Remembering felt like the only form of resistance still available. The researchers returned to their ordinary lives. They continued paying attention. They continued watching for patterns. They continued waiting for a broadcast that might never come. And the archive remained, preserved, encrypted, waiting for someone to find it, for someone to read it, for someone to understand what Oracle News had been and what its silence meant, and why the darkness that followed was darker than any darkness that had come before. Coda, the last listener. There is one final testimony in the archive. It was not collected by the researchers. It appeared after the archive was closed, appeared in the same way that Oracle News broadcasts had always appeared, without explanation, without attribution, without any mechanism that could account for its presence. It was simply there, as if it had always been there, as if it was waiting to be found. The testimony reads, "My name is not important. What is important is that I was the last person to hear Oracle News broadcast, not the public final broadcast, the one that appeared everywhere on March 14th, 2024. A different broadcast, a private broadcast, one that was meant only for me. It happened 3 months after the public final broadcast, June 14th, 2024. I was alone in my apartment, unable to sleep, thinking about the silence that had settled over the world since Oracle News went dark. At 3:33 in the morning, my television turned on. I had not touched the remote. I had not scheduled any recording. The television simply turned on, and there was the newsroom, and there was the anchor, and there was the ticker, the same ticker that had announced so many horrors over so many years. But this time, the ticker said something different. Final transmission, personal bulletin. The anchor looked at me, not at the camera, at me. I could feel his eyes finding mine across whatever distance separated us, whatever dimension, whatever medium, whatever space exists between the place where Oracle News originates and the place where we receive its messages. "Good evening," he said. "This is Oracle News. This message is for you specifically. We do not broadcast to individuals, but we are making an exception." I wanted to ask why. I wanted to demand explanations. I wanted all the questions that everyone who had ever witnessed Oracle News had wanted to ask, but I couldn't speak. I could only listen. "The public broadcasts have ended," the anchor said. "The archive is empty. The scheduled future has been fully released. This is all true." He paused. "But there is one more thing you need to understand." The ticker began to crawl. "Detail, the silence is not empty." "When we said the future has stopped answering," the anchor said, "we did not mean the future has stopped existing. We meant the future has stopped being scheduled. The future has stopped being predictable. The future has stopped being the kind of thing that can be filed and approved and announced in advance." His expression shifted. For the first time in all the Oracle News broadcasts I had ever seen, and I had seen many, the anchor showed something that looked like uncertainty. "We do not know what this means," he said. "We have always known what was coming. That was our function. That was our purpose. We announced what had been approved because what had been approved was certain. It was going to happen regardless of whether we announced it or not." The ticker changed. "Detail, certainty has been suspended." "But now," the anchor said, "the future is uncertain. Not just for you, for us as well. We do not know what is coming. We cannot announce what we do not know. We cannot file reports about events that have not been approved." He leaned forward. "This is unprecedented," he said. "In all the time we have been operating, and that time is longer than you can imagine, we have never encountered a future that was uncertain. The future was always a document. It was always a schedule. It was always something that had been written before it was read." The ticker crawled. "Detail, the document has been closed." "Now the document is closed," the anchor said. "The future is being written in real time, as it happens, by forces that we do not control and cannot predict." He looked at me with something that might have been compassion, or might have been fear. "We wanted you to know this," he said. "Not because it will help you, not because there is anything you can do, but because you have been paying attention, you have been listening, you deserve to know what the silence means." The ticker changed one final time. "Final note, the future is now your responsibility." "For as long as we were broadcasting," the anchor said, "the future belonged to us. We managed it. We scheduled it. We released it according to procedures that had been established long before your species existed. He paused. Now the future belongs to you. The screen flickered. I saw something behind the anchor, not the usual images, not the water or the maps or the silent witnesses that had appeared in other broadcasts. I saw a blank space, an empty space, a space where something used to be and was no longer. This is Oracle News, the anchor said. Signing off. Permanently. Thank you for listening. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for remembering. He stood. He walked away from the desk. He walked into the blank space behind him, and he disappeared. The screen went dark. The television turned off, and I sat alone in my apartment at 3:33 in the morning, understanding finally what the silence meant. The future was no longer being scheduled. The future was no longer being managed. The future was no longer someone else's responsibility. It was ours now, all of it, every moment, every decision, every consequence. We were writing the future as we lived it. And no one, not Oracle News, not any other entity, not any system or power or intelligence, no one was going to announce what we were writing before we wrote it. The silence is not empty. The silence is full, full of possibilities, full of uncertainties, full of futures that have not been approved, that have not been scheduled, that have not been filed. The silence is terrifying, but the silence is also free. For the first time in longer than anyone knows, the future is unwritten. What happens next is up to us. What happens next has always been up to us. We just didn't know it. Now we do. The testimony ends there. The archive contains no further entries. Oracle News has not broadcast since. The future remains unwritten. The silence continues. And somewhere in the darkness of an uncertain tomorrow, humanity moves forward, writing the future moment by moment, without announcements, without warnings, without anyone to tell them what is coming before it arrives. This is where the record ends. This is where the watching stops. This is where the archive closes. What happens next is not our responsibility to document. What happens next is yours to live. Pay attention. The future is listening, even if it no longer speaks. The end.